You know, people have said to me, you could go a little easier on progressives. You won't change anyone's mind by insulting them. And that may be true, but you won't change their mind by not insulting them either, so what's the difference? Talking politics with a progressive is like talking religion with a Jehovah's Witness. If you don't play it for laughs, it will drive you up the wall. Because progressives only hear what they want to hear and what they are determined to hear, regardless of what is actually being said. However clearly and unambiguously you argue for secularism or democracy or free speech or any other civilized value, progressives will hear prejudice, hatred, xenophobia and racism, especially racism, because it's what they need to hear. Otherwise they'd have to address the arguments and expose their shameless double standards. This way they can simply attack your character, which is of course what they always do. And these people shouldn't be insulted. What else is there? If you want to insult a progressive, and frankly I have yet to meet anyone outside the progressive bubble who doesn't, then you probably know already that a good way to do it is to tell them the truth when the truth is incorrect. It really is the ultimate affront. And obviously the more incorrect the better. That's if you feel like a bit of sport, because often they'll struggle even to process the information. So childishly committed are progressives to believing what they think should be the truth, but isn't and never will be. So for example, oh, and by the way, trigger warning progressives, you might want to adopt the standard procedure at this point and put your fingers in your ears, if you haven't already. You could start by pointing out to them that all cultures are not equal, that they're not even close to being equal, and that only somebody who's been hypnotized would think they were. You could then add that it's perfectly possible for black and brown-skinned people to be racist. They'll hate this because to progressives, if somebody has a darker skin tone, then all criticism of anything they say or do is a far-right hate crime, especially if they speak or behave in a way that invites ridicule and contempt. Another good way to get the progressive dander up is to tell them that nobody has the right to censor anyone else's opinion, however hurt their feelings might be. Now, progressives will really hate this one, because they are more inclined than anyone outside religion to believe that your thoughts and opinions are subject to their moral jurisdiction. So whereas a normal person may disagree with your views, a progressive will disapprove of them. And for progressives, it's never enough to simply disapprove of a thing. It must be banned. You must be silenced. And when you're not silenced, it really does seem to annoy them. So it's always worth rubbing it in whenever you can. Another good way to insult these pseudo-liberal plonkers, no offence, is to tell them that opposing a federal dictatorship in Europe has nothing to do with racism or xenophobia, and that only a malicious and paranoid mind would think otherwise. That should get their malicious and paranoid minds in the highest of dudgeon. But if you really want to get these self-righteous half-wits apoplectic with fury, then simply point to the Middle East and tell them that the so-called Palestinian problem is self-created and driven entirely by crude Arab, Muslim, Jew hatred as mandated by Scripture. For a bit more spice, you could add that Israel is not an apartheid state, unlike some of its uncivilized neighbours, and that the BDS movement is a poisonous cultural terrorist group full of rancid, anti-Semitic, left-wing fascists. And that is putting it kindly. Of course, with the religion of special needs, anything you say can potentially insult progressives, as blaming Islam for anything at all is out of the question. However, since Islam is so clearly to blame for so much, this creates the kind of cognitive dissonance in progressives that we typically associate with religious believers. When reality can't be squared with dogma, they somehow end up believing both and seeing no contradiction. So progressives can see very well that Islam is a massive problem in the West, but it can't be, so it isn't. Tra-la-la-la-la. It's such an unfortunate mental condition, it's hard not to sympathise, but luckily not impossible. So you could start by telling them bluntly that Islam is unwelcome in the West because Muslims have made it unwelcome and because progressive PC dipshits like them have helped them do it. You could add that Islam is a serious threat to everyone's freedom, especially if they're female or Jewish or gay, and that it has brought absolutely nothing of value to Western society. All it has done is take and complain and cause trouble, and it has made us less tolerant, less civilized, less safe, and less free. And that if our society is to survive with its core values intact, freedom of speech, freedom of identity, and lots of other essential, healthy, civilized freedoms, then Islam needs to be vigorously and specifically legislated out of all public influence in all Western countries permanently, for the sake of tolerance and diversity and respect. Oh, and don't forget to mention that the fraudulent propaganda term Islamophobia is not a real word. It represents no phenomenon of any significance, and anyone using it is a traitor to humanity. That should just about do it. Now, of course, if you say these things, you will instantly bring down a torrent of slanderous abuse on your head, but relax, that's part and parcel of dealing with progressives. You'll quickly find out that abuse is all they've got, and when you think of the desperate culture of denial and the abject moral vacuum it's coming from, it's hard to imagine a higher compliment or a more spectacular endorsement. Thanks, progressives.